The last flight, the desperate escape. The Valari transport fleet limped through the darkness of space like wounded animals fleeing a predator. 15 ships, once proud vessels of a thriving civilization, now bore the scars of relentless pursuit. Burn marks striped their hulls. Entire sections had been sealed off where the void had breached their defenses. Inside these dying ships, 8,000 souls clung to hope that grew thinner with each passing day. Commander Vane stood in the cramped bridge of the lead vessel, the Morning Star, watching the navigation display with tired eyes. Her silver fur, once pristine and carefully groomed, now hung matted and dull. The Valari were a feline species, elegant and proud, but 3 years of running had stripped away much of that pride. What remained was survival instinct and the desperate need to protect those who depended on her decisions. "Commander, the engines are failing on the Brightwing," her chief engineer Cross reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "They have maybe 6 hours before complete shutdown. The Swift Dawn isn't much better. We're losing ships faster than we can repair them." Vane's clawed hand tightened on the command rail. 6 hours. They had been running for 3 years, jumping from system to system, always one step ahead of the hegemony armada. The hegemony didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They conquered or they destroyed. When the Valari Republic had refused to submit to their empire, the hegemony had made an example of them. 5 billion Valari had died when their homeworld burned. These 8,000 were all that remained of an entire civilization. "Any inhabited systems within range?" Vane asked, though she already knew the answer. They had asked this question 100 times before. "There's one," Cross said slowly, pulling up a star chart. "Sol system. Third planet designated as Earth. The inhabitants call themselves humans. They've only had faster-than-light capability for about 20 years. Primitive by most standards, but they have established colonies on their moon and inner planets." Vane studied the data streaming across her screen. A young species, barely stepping into the larger galaxy. They would have no reason to help refugees from a war they knew nothing about. Worse, sheltering the Valari could bring the hegemony's wrath down upon them. It was too much to ask of anyone, let alone a species that had never encountered alien life beyond a few trading posts. "They're our only option," her navigation officer Thera said quietly. The young Valari's ears lay flat against her head, a sign of deep worry. "The next closest inhabited system is 14 days away. We won't make it." Vane closed her eyes and made the decision that would change everything. Set course for Earth. Begin composing a message in their dominant languages. Make it clear we're refugees, not invaders. And pray to the ancestors that they have more compassion than sense. Arrival at Earth's border. Human Monitoring Station Delta 7 detected the Valari fleet when they were still 2 days out from Earth orbit. Lieutenant Marcus Webb had been pulling a routine shift, expecting nothing more exciting than tracking asteroid movements and checking supply schedules. When his console lit up with 15 unknown signatures, his coffee went cold in his hand. "Commander Park, you need to see this," Marcus called to his superior officer. "We've got multiple contacts, unknown configuration, on approach vector to Earth. Their engine signatures don't match anything in our database." Commander Sarah Park moved to his station with quick, efficient steps. She had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 15 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's rapid expansion into space. She had seen tension with a few alien traders, dealt with one attempted piracy from a species called the Gorvax. But nothing like this. 15 ships moving together meant a fleet. A fleet meant potential threat. "Get me Earth Command," Park ordered, "and scan those ships thoroughly. I want to know if they're carrying weapons, what their condition is, everything." The scans revealed ships in terrible condition. Their energy signatures were weak and fluctuating. Several showed hull breaches that had been hastily sealed. These weren't invaders preparing for attack. These were survivors barely holding together. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer reported. "Audio and visual. They're broadcasting in English, Mandarin, Spanish, and Arabic. Someone did their homework." The face that appeared on screen stopped all conversation in the monitoring station. The being was clearly feline in appearance, with silver fur and large amber eyes that held an ocean of weariness. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had lost everything, but couldn't afford to give up. "People of Earth, I am Commander Vane of the Valari Republic. We come to you not as conquerors or traitors, but as refugees seeking temporary sanctuary. Our civilization was destroyed by an empire called the Hegemony, because we refused to surrender our freedom. For 3 years we have fled across the stars, Our ships are failing. Our supplies are nearly exhausted. We have children who are sick and injured. We know we have no right to ask this of you, a young species we have never met, but we are desperate. We seek only a safe harbor to rest and repair our vessels before we continue our journey. We will share what knowledge we can and will depart as soon as we are able. Please, we have nowhere else to go. The transmission ended, leaving the monitoring station in stunned silence. First contact with an alien species. Not traitors at a neutral station, but refugees fleeing genocide. Asking humanity for help. Sir, what do we do? Marcus asked quietly. Commander Park stared at the image frozen on her screen, the exhausted feline face pleading for help. She thought about her own daughter, safe at home on Earth. She thought about what she would want someone to do if their positions were reversed. We do what's right, Park said firmly. Get me Earth Command. Tell them first contact is happening and we need a decision fast. Those ships look like they might fall apart before anyone finishes debating. First contact with humanity. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened within 4 hours of the Volari transmission. Representatives from every major nation gathered virtually, their faces filling screens in the council chamber in Geneva. The debate was fierce and immediate. We know nothing about these beings or this hegemony they speak of, argued Ambassador Chen from the Asian Confederation. Helping them could bring an enemy we're not prepared to face directly to our doorstep. We have to think of Earth's safety first. And what does it say about humanity if we turn away refugees? Countered Representative Okafor from the African Union. We've fought wars over refugees on our own planet. We've debated our moral obligations to help those fleeing violence. Now we have the chance to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. Do we want our first major act in the galactic community to be closing our doors? Secretary General Maria Santos listened to the arguments from all sides. She had been chosen to lead the United Earth Council precisely because she could balance competing interests and make hard decisions. This was perhaps the hardest decision humanity had ever faced collectively. Let me ask a simple question, Santos said, her voice cutting through the debate. If we were the ones fleeing genocide with our children dying on failing ships, what would we want another species to do? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ambassador Chen looked down at his hands. Representative Okafor nodded slowly. Around the virtual chamber, faces reflected the same internal struggle. We vote, Santos declared. Full council. The question is simple. Does Earth offer sanctuary to the Volari refugees? We'll deal with the consequences, whatever they may be, but we make this choice now based on who we want to be. Vote. The tally took less than 2 minutes. When it finished, Santos felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. The vote was 187 in favor, 23 against, with 12 abstentions. Humanity had made its choice. The choice to help Commander Vane had been preparing her people for rejection when the response came from Earth. She had drafted speeches about trying to reach the next system, about rationing their last supplies, about how they would face the end with dignity. She had not prepared for what actually happened. The human face on her screen was female, middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver threading through her dark hair. When Secretary General Santos spoke, her words were clear and firm. Commander Vane, on behalf of the United Earth Council and all humanity, I welcome you to our system. We are mobilizing resources now to assist your fleet. Medical ships are being dispatched to treat your sick and injured. Our lunar colonies are being prepared to house your people. We ask only that you work with our health officials to ensure no biological incompatibilities that could harm either of our species. But we will not turn you away. You've run far enough. You're safe now. Vane felt her legs give way. She caught herself on the command rail, her claws scraping against the metal. Around her, the bridge crew stood frozen in shock. Thera, the young navigation officer, made a sound between a sob and a laugh. Cross, the grizzled engineer, covered his face with his hands. You're really helping us? Vane managed to say, her voice breaking. Just like that? You don't know us. This could bring danger to your world? Santos smiled, and it was warm and genuine. Commander, humanity has made a lot of mistakes in its history. We've turned away people who needed help, and we've regretted it every time. We're not making that mistake today. Besides, someone once said that you judge a civilization not by how it treats its strongest members, but how it treats its weakest. Well, right now you need help. That makes it simple for us. Tears tracked through the fur on Vane's face. a gesture humans wouldn't understand yet but would soon learn meant overwhelming emotion for the Valari. How can we ever repay such kindness? You don't have to repay it, Santos replied. You just remember it. Someday when you're back on your feet and you meet someone else who needs help, you pass it on. That's how kindness works. Now let's get your ships to safety and your people some rest. You've been running long enough. Setting up sanctuary within 12 hours of Earth's decision, humanity mobilized with an efficiency that astonished the Valari. The Luna 3 colony, humanity's largest settlement on the moon, opened its habitation domes. Medical frigates launched from Earth orbit, their bays filled with supplies and xenobiologists, who had been studying Valari physiology from the data Vane had transmitted. Dr. Jennifer Walsh led the medical team aboard, the first ship to dock with the Valari fleet. She was a trauma surgeon who had volunteered immediately when the call went out. As she stepped through the airlock onto the Morning Star, the reality of the Valari situation hit her with full force. The refugees were thin, their fur patchy from malnutrition and stress. Children huddled against adults, their eyes too large in their small faces. The smell of recycled air pushed far past its limits hung heavy in the corridors. These weren't just refugees. These were survivors who had been pushed to the absolute edge of what beings could endure. Dr. Walsh? Commander Vane approached, moving with careful dignity despite her obvious exhaustion. Thank you for coming. Our medical supplies ran out 2 months ago. We've been doing what we can, but... Show me your sickbay, Jennifer said gently, and let's start with the children. We brought everything we could think of, and more ships are coming behind us. You're not alone anymore, Commander. Over the next week, the Valari fleet was guided to stable orbit around Luna. Human engineers worked alongside Valari technicians to repair the damaged ships. Medical teams treated injuries and illnesses, working around the clock to stabilize the most critical cases. Psychologists began the delicate work of helping traumatized refugees begin to process 3 years of constant terror. In the Luna 3 colony, sections were reconfigured for Valari needs. The gravity was adjusted in certain areas. Food synthesizers were reprogrammed to create meals compatible with Valari biology. Human families opened their homes, inviting Valari families to share meals and exchange stories, despite the language barriers that translation software slowly broke down. Young Thera, the Valari navigation officer, found herself in a common area surrounded by human children who wanted to touch her fur and ask endless questions. At first she had frozen, traumatized by 3 years of seeing children die on failing ships. But their curiosity and openness wore down her fear. When a small human girl named Emma asked if she could show Thera her toy spacecraft, Thera had laughed for the first time in years. Commander Vane stood in the observation deck of Luna 3, looking down at Earth spinning below. Secretary General Santos had come to visit, to see how the integration was proceeding. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the blue planet that had offered sanctuary without hesitation. Your people are remarkable, Vane said softly. In 3 years of running, we contacted 14 species. 7 refused to even respond. 5 offered to sell us supplies at prices we couldn't afford. 2 actively informed the hegemony of our location for bounty rewards. You are the first to simply help. Why? Santos considered the question, watching Earth's clouds swirl in beautiful patterns. Maybe because we remember what it's like to be vulnerable. Humanity almost destroyed itself several times before we united. We remember wars and genocides and refugees with nowhere to go. We remember both our worst moments and the times when compassion saved us. She turned to look at Vane directly, but I think mostly it's because your message asked the right question. You said you had nowhere else to go, and we realized that sometimes the only thing that matters is being the place someone can go. Vane's ears pricked forward, an expression of hope and gratitude. The hegemony won't ignore your action. They'll come eventually, if only to make an example. They don't tolerate defiance. Santos's expression hardened, her jaw setting in a way that Vane would learn meant human determination. Then let them come. We've dealt with bullies before, Commander, and we have a saying on Earth: you don't abandon family. Your people are under our protection now. That means something to humans. It means everything, actually. For the first time in 3 years, Vane allowed herself to believe they might actually survive. Not just survive, but live. Build something new, be safe. And all because one young species had decided that doing the right thing mattered more than convenience or safety. Earth had made them a promise in that acceptance. You're safe now. Vane didn't know it yet, But humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what they meant when they made a promise to protect someone. The hegemony was coming, and they were about to learn that threatening someone under human protection was a very bad idea. Earth had made them a promise in that acceptance. You're safe now. Vane didn't know it yet. But humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what they meant when they made a promise to protect someone. The hegemony was coming, and they were about to learn that threatening someone under human protection was a very bad idea. The last ships of the Volari fleet settled into their temporary home. Repairs began in earnest. Children started to laugh again. And on Earth below, military planners began preparing for the day when humanity would have to back up its promise of protection with action. That day was coming sooner than anyone expected. The promise kept building trust and new homes. 3 months passed like a dream the Volari had forgotten how to have. The refugees who had spent years sleeping in shifts on crowded, failing ships now had actual quarters with beds and privacy. Children attended learning centers where human and Volari teachers worked together, creating curriculum that bridged two species' knowledge. The sick and injured had recovered under Dr. Walsh's care, their fur regaining its luster, their eyes losing that haunted edge that came from too much loss. Commander Vane walked through the Luna 3 marketplace, still marveling at the transformation. What had been a simple human trading area had evolved into something new. Volari merchants had set up stalls selling crafts made from recycled ship materials, beautiful crystalline sculptures that caught and refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Human vendors offered foods from Earth, patiently explaining ingredients to curious Volari. The two species moved among each other easily now, the initial awkwardness of first contact giving way to genuine friendship. Thera, the young navigation officer, had become something of a celebrity among human children. She ran an informal school where she taught them about stars and navigation, using Volari methods that were more intuitive than human mathematics. In return, she had learned to play an Earth game called soccer, though her feline reflexes made her unfairly good at it. Watching her laugh and play with human kids, Vane sometimes forgot the traumatized officer who had barely spoken for the first year of their flight. "Commander Vane," a voice called out in accented but clear Volari. Dr. Jennifer Walsh approached, her medical bag slung over one shoulder. She had learned the vocalized language with impressive speed, though her pronunciation still made some Volari smile. "I was hoping to find you. We need to discuss the integration health assessments." They walked together toward the medical center, falling into the easy partnership that had developed over months of working closely. Jennifer had become more than the Volari's doctor. She had become their advocate, their teacher about human culture, and Vane's trusted friend. "The assessments show something interesting," Jennifer said as they entered her office. "Your people's stress markers have dropped by 70%. Depression indicators are down. The children are showing normal developmental patterns again. Vane, you're healing, all of you." Vane felt her tail swish with pleasure, an unconscious gesture that Jennifer had learned meant happiness. "Your people gave us back our lives. We were surviving before, now we're living again. The children play. The adults make plans beyond the next day. We're remembering how to hope." Jennifer smiled, but there was concern in her eyes. "That's wonderful, and I'm genuinely happy. But I have to ask, have you given any thought to what comes next? You said you planned to leave once your ships were repaired. The engineering team say the fleet will be spaceworthy again in about 6 weeks. The question hung heavy in the air. Vane had been avoiding this conversation, even in her own thoughts. The truth was, she didn't want to leave. None of them did. Earth's solar system had become home in a way their temporary refuges had never been. But they had promised to depart once ready, and the Volari kept their promises. "We have to leave," Vane said quietly. "Not because we want to, but because staying puts you at risk. The hegemony will eventually track us here. Every day we remain increases the danger to humanity." "And what if we don't want you to leave?" Jennifer asked. "What if the council is discussing offering permanent settlement? You've already been integrating with our society. Our kids are learning from your teachers. Our engineers are learning from your technology, and your engineers are learning from ours. You're not refugees anymore, Vane. You're neighbors." Before Vane could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the colony. The emergency broadcast system activated, its automated voice cutting through every speaker in Luna 3. "Alert. Unidentified vessels detected entering solar system. Alert. Multiple hostile signatures confirmed. All personnel to designated emergency stations. This is not a drill. Vane's blood turned to ice. She knew those alarm patterns. She had heard them in her nightmares for 3 years. The hegemony had found them. The hegemony returns. The hegemony war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of locusts. 47 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light, their weapon systems already charging. At their center was the flagship Dominion, commanded by war leader Kretch, the hegemony officer who had personally overseen the destruction of the Valari homeworld. On Earth, in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, Admiral James Mitchell watched the tactical display with a sinking feeling in his gut. He had fought in Earth's unification wars, had commanded fleets in the minor skirmishes with pirates and aggressive traders. But this was different. This was a fleet designed for conquest, led by a species that had perfected the art of subjugation. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer reported. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's addressed to Earth's government." The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, with dark scales and eyes that held no warmth or mercy. War leader Kretch spoke in perfectly translated English, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had never been denied. "Humans of Earth, I am War Leader Kretch of the Hegemony Armada. You are harboring criminals who fled justice. The Valari refugees in your system are property of the Hegemony, spoils of rightful conquest. You will surrender them immediately for processing. You will also pay reparations for the resources expended in tracking them. Comply within 12 hours, or we will take them by force and claim your system as compensation. The Hegemony does not negotiate. We do not compromise. You have 12 hours. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Admiral Mitchell looked around at his officers, seeing his own anger reflected in their faces. They had all met the Valari over the past 3 months. They had shared meals with them, worked alongside them, watched their children play with human children. The idea of handing them over to be enslaved or killed was unthinkable. "Get me Secretary General Santos," Mitchell ordered, "and prepare the fleet for combat deployment. All ships, all stations. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." Humanity's stand, the emergency session of the United Earth Council, lasted exactly 17 minutes. There was no debate this time, no careful weighing of options. When Secretary General Santos called for a vote on whether to surrender the Valari, the response was unanimous and immediate. Not one voice voted yes. "Then we're at war," Santos said simply. "Admiral Mitchell, you have full authorization to deploy Earth's defense forces. Protect our people, all of them, the Valari included." On Luna 3, panic threatened to overwhelm order as the Valari refugees learned the Hegemony had arrived. Commander Vane found herself surrounded by her people, all looking to her for guidance as they had for 3 terrible years. "We have to go," Vane announced, her voice carrying authority despite the fear in her chest. "We'll take what ships are flight-ready and leave immediately. Draw the Hegemony away from Earth. It's the only way to protect humanity from our mistakes." "No." The voice came from the crowd, and the Valari parted to reveal Dr. Jennifer Walsh, flanked by a dozen other humans. "You're not leaving. We're not surrendering you. Earth has made its decision." "You can't fight them," Vane protested. "The Hegemony fleet will destroy you. They've conquered 100 worlds. Your ships are no match for their firepower." Jennifer stepped forward, taking Vane's clawed hand in her own smaller human hand. "Maybe not. But there's something you need to understand about humans, Commander. We're stubborn. We're foolishly optimistic, and when we say someone is under our protection, we mean it. You're not just refugees anymore. You're part of us, and we protect our own." Throughout the Sol system, humanity mobilized for war with a speed that surprised even themselves. Every military vessel from Earth to Mars colony launched and formed battle lines. Civilian ships evacuated to protected zones. Defensive platforms powered up weapons that had only ever been tested. And on Luna 3, human and Valari engineers worked together frantically, adapting Valari weapon technology to human ships. Thera found herself back on a ship's bridge, but this time aboard the human destroyer Defiant. Captain Rodriguez had requested her specifically, wanting Valari tactical knowledge about Hegemony combat patterns. As she worked alongside human officers, Thera felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just hope, but belief that they might actually win. The hegemony relies on overwhelming firepower and intimidation, Thera explained, highlighting weak points on a hegemony ship diagram. They expect species to surrender or be crushed. They've never faced an enemy willing to fight tactically while outgunned. If we can exploit their formation weaknesses, use hit-and-run tactics, we might have a chance. Captain Rodriguez studied the information, then smiled grimly. Sounds like asymmetric warfare. Humanity wrote the book on that. Let's teach these hegemony bullies what happens when they pick on someone with friends. As the 12-hour deadline approached, Admiral Mitchell broadcast a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. He sat in the command chair of the flagship Guardian, the most powerful ship humanity had ever built, with Earth hanging in the viewscreen behind him. War Leader Kretsch, this is Admiral James Mitchell of the United Earth Defense Force. I have a response to your ultimatum. The Volari refugees are under Earth's protection. They are not property. They are not criminals. They are people who refuse to be enslaved, and for that we honor them. You want them? You'll have to go through us. And I should warn you, humanity has faced extinction more times than we can count. We're still here. We don't surrender. We don't abandon our own, and we really don't like bullies. So here's our counteroffer. Leave our system peacefully and we'll let you go home. Stay, and we'll show you why picking a fight with humanity is the worst mistake you'll ever make. You have 1 hour to decide. Choose wisely. The battle for freedom, the hegemony response was predictable. War Leader Kretsch, who had never been defied by a species he considered inferior, ordered an immediate attack. The 47 ships of his fleet accelerated toward Earth's defensive lines. Weapons charging, confident in their overwhelming superiority, they were about to learn that humanity fought differently than any species they had encountered. Before Admiral Mitchell waited until the hegemony fleet committed fully to their attack formation, their ships clustering together for maximum firepower concentration. It was a formation that had crushed 100 defensive stands. Against humanity, it became a fatal mistake. All ships, Mitchell ordered calmly, execute alpha pattern. Show them what creativity looks like. The human fleet didn't meet the hegemony head-on. Instead, they scattered like startled birds, each ship moving on seemingly random vectors. The hegemony ships fired, their massive cannons designed to obliterate stationary targets. But human ships were small, fast, and piloted by officers who had trained in three-dimensional combat in Earth's orbital training grounds. Meanwhile, the Volari engineers' contributions showed their worth. Human missiles that should have been deflected by hegemony shields instead punched through, targeting the specific frequency vulnerabilities Thera had identified. Explosions blossomed across hegemony hulls as humanity's smaller weapons struck with surgical precision. They're adapting, Kretsch roared on the Dominion's bridge. These primitives are actually fighting back effectively. All ships, break formation. Hunt them down individually. It was exactly what Admiral Mitchell had wanted. As the hegemony fleet broke apart, human ships enacted the second phase. They herded individual hegemony vessels toward prepared positions where Luna's defensive platforms waited. The platforms, enhanced with Volari energy weapons, opened fire at point-blank range. The battle raged for 6 hours. 3 human destroyers were lost with all hands. 2 orbital platforms were destroyed. But the hegemony, for the first time in their conquest history, were bleeding. 8 of their warships were disabled or destroyed. A dozen more had taken critical damage, and humanity showed no signs of surrendering. On the Defiant, Thera coordinated targeting data for an assault on the hegemony flagship itself. Captain Rodriguez had volunteered for the most dangerous mission, a direct strike on the Dominion while it was distracted by the larger battle. Target locked, the weapons officer reported. Firing solution optimal. For the Volari, Rodriguez said quietly. And for Earth, fire everything. The Defiant's entire missile complement launched simultaneously, enhanced with Volari warhead technology. The Dominion's shields flared, held for 3 seconds, then collapsed. Missiles struck the flagship's command section, tearing through armor and into critical systems. On the Dominion's bridge, War Leader Kretsch watched his displays fail one by one. Impossible. They were losing. To primitives and the refugees they protected. The shame would follow him forever if he survived. Retreat, Kretsch ordered, his voice breaking with fury and disbelief. All ships, emergency hyperspace jump. Retreat! The remaining hegemony vessels disengaged desperately, fleeing toward the system's edge. Human ships pursued, harrying them every meter of the way, ensuring they understood the cost of threatening Earth. As the last hegemony ship vanished into hyperspace, a cheer erupted across every human vessel and station. They had won. Against impossible odds, outgunned and outmatched, humanity and the Valari together had sent the hegemony running, a new beginning together. In the aftermath of battle, as repair crews worked to save damaged ships and medical teams tended to the wounded, Secretary General Santos and Commander Vane stood together in Luna 3's observation deck once more. Earth hung below them, beautiful and whole, protected by the combined courage of two species. "We lost 97 people," Santos said softly. "Good people who died protecting yours." Vane's ears lay flat, her tail still, grief evident in every line of her body. "I know, I've memorized every name, every face. How can we possibly—" "Don't," Santos interrupted gently. "Don't ask how you can repay it. Those people didn't die for repayment. They died because they believed that protecting people who needed help was worth dying for. Honor them by living, by building something beautiful here with us." "You want us to stay?" Vane asked, though she already knew the answer. Santos smiled. "Commander, you were never just refugees. You were always going to be family. We just needed to prove to both of our species that we meant it. The Council voted this morning. We're offering permanent settlement to any Valari who want it. Full citizenship, equal rights. Earth's protection now and always." Tears tracked through Vane's fur again, but this time they were tears of joy mixed with grief. "And if the hegemony returns with a larger fleet? Then we'll fight them again," Santos said with absolute certainty. "And we'll win. Because that's what families do. They stand together, always." In the days that followed, the Valari made their choice. Every single refugee voted to stay. Luna 3 expanded its domes to accommodate permanent Valari districts. On Earth, cities prepared to welcome families who wanted to experience the home world directly. Mars Colony began accepting Valari settlers who wanted to help terraform the Red Planet. The two species began to truly merge their knowledge. Valari scientists shared star mapping techniques that would let humanity explore twice as fast. Human engineers shared ship designs that the Valari admitted were more creative than anything in their archives. Medical knowledge flowed both ways, advancing healthcare for both species. Thera, the young navigation officer who had survived so much, was offered a permanent position in Earth's defense force. She accepted, becoming the first Valari to wear a human military uniform. When asked why she made that choice, her answer was simple. "Because when I was lost and alone, humans promised no one would hurt me again. They kept that promise. Now I want to help them keep it for others." 6 months after the battle, a monument was erected on Luna 3. It bore the names of the 97 humans who had died defending the Valari, alongside the names of the 5 billion Valari lost to the hegemony's initial attack. At the base was inscribed a phrase in both English and Valari. "Here we remember those lost to hatred and honor those who chose compassion. Two species, one family, never alone again." Commander Vane, now holding the title of ambassador, stood at the dedication ceremony surrounded by humans and Valari alike. Dr. Jennifer Walsh stood beside her, as she always did now. As Vane gave her speech, she looked out at the faces watching her, both human and Valari, children of both species playing together without seeing any difference that mattered. "When we arrived at Earth," Vane said, her voice carrying across the crowd, "we were broken. We had lost everything. We expected nothing more than temporary shelter before we continued running. Instead, we found something we thought was extinct in the galaxy. We found people who helped not because it benefited them, but because it was right, who fought not to conquer, but to protect, who looked at strangers and saw family." She paused, collecting herself. "The hegemony took our world. They scattered our people. They thought they had destroyed us. But they were wrong. Because the Valari didn't end on our home planet. We continued here with humanity, building something neither of our species could have built alone. The hegemony wanted to show the galaxy what happens when you refuse to submit. Instead, Earth and the Valari together showed the galaxy something more important. What happens when you refuse to abandon each other?" The crowd erupted in applause, human and Valari voices blending together. Young Emma, the human girl who had first befriended Thera, sat on the shoulders of a Valari engineer, waving a flag that combined Earth's blue and the Valari's silver. It was a perfect symbol of what they had become, distinct but united, different but family. That night, as Earth turned below and stars wheeled above, Vane stood in her quarters looking at a photograph. It showed the original 15 ships of the Volari fleet, broken and dying, hanging in space. She kept it to remember, not to remember the pain, but to remember the moment everything changed. The moment they met a species that proved compassion wasn't weakness, that kindness wasn't naivety, and that the promise "no one hurts you again" wasn't empty words. It was a vow humanity meant with every fiber of their being. And they had proven it. The Volari had been exiled and alone, running from genocide with nowhere to go. They had found humanity, and humanity had looked at them and said the words that changed everything. "You're safe now. We've got you. No one hurts you again." In the end, that promise became more than words. It became the foundation of an alliance that would eventually reshape the galaxy. Because word spread about what happened in the Sol system, about a young species that chose compassion over convenience, that fought an empire for refugees they barely knew, that kept their promises even when it cost them dearly. Other species, other refugees, other outcasts began looking toward Earth, and humanity, true to form, kept opening their doors, each time saying the same thing: "You're welcome here. You're safe now. We protect our own." The hegemony never returned to Sol, but their empire began to crumble as species they oppressed heard about Earth, heard about humanity, heard about the planet where being different didn't make you an enemy, and where promises of protection weren't negotiable. Commander Vane, Ambassador Vane now, lived to see her people thrive again. She saw Volari human children born from couples who fell in love across species lines. She saw joint colonies on distant worlds. She saw the day 30 years later when the Volari Republic was officially reformed, not as a separate nation but as part of the United Species Alliance, with Earth at its heart. On her deathbed, surrounded by human and Volari loved ones, someone asked her what she wanted to be remembered for. Her answer was simple: "Remember that I was one of the lucky ones. I was lost and alone, and then I found humanity. Everything else was just living the life their compassion gave me a chance to have." She died peacefully, knowing her people were safe, knowing the promise had been kept. And across the Alliance, from Earth to New Volara to the colonies scattered among the stars, both species mourned together. Because that's what families do. On her deathbed, surrounded by human and Volari loved ones, someone asked her what she wanted to be remembered for. Her answer was simple: "Remember that I was one of the lucky ones. I was lost and alone, and then I found humanity. Everything else was just living the life their compassion gave me a chance to have." She died peacefully, knowing her people were safe, knowing the promise had been kept. And across the Alliance, from Earth to New Volara to the colonies scattered among the stars, both species mourned together. Because that's what families do. The Volari had been exiled and alone, but they found humanity. And humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo for centuries. When someone needs help, you help. When someone needs protection, you protect. When someone is alone, you make sure they're never alone again. That was humanity's promise, and humanity always kept its promises.